Welcome to Talk Your Chart. My name is Marco Segrera. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Brett Horowitz. BH, how are you?
Morning, Marcos. What's on our agenda today?
Today, we are looking at, and I'm going to go first. Is that okay with you?
Go for it.
Okay, good. So over the weekend, I was talking to somebody who had a less than positive perspective on the last 12 months of life in the US. And I said, why is that? Thinking perhaps it would be more a personal route, and he went economic on me. And I said, wrong person to go economic with. And then I didn't have the chart with me at the time, but I pulled it up and sent it to him later. And that's what we're looking at today, which is the US real, so after inflation, GDP, which we just crossed a new all-time high at the end of Q2. So if you're looking at the chart here, you see a crazy off a cliff drop, which we know what caused that. And then that V-shaped recovery everyone was talking about, it's complete. We've hit a new all-time high.
So this is probably your average American, right? This is not someone who's extremely left or right or someone that is not based on reality, right? I think most people probably think that we haven't crossed where we were before. They're probably still nervous about where things are. They see that things are open, but they're not sure if they should trust the data.
Yeah, 100%. I think this chart, man, and we bring stuff up like this a lot, what this shows is it's really hard to tell when the upside of the V is going to come. Because if you look at when this started happening, not that we can tell precisely here, but call it June of last year, the dust hadn't settled, but this had already started.
Right.
So for those who said, let me take some chips off the table, let me de-risk, so to speak, you probably ended up doing it at a bad time because you had this kind of goal in mind of waiting for the dust to settle, but there's no signal that says, okay, everything's fine, participate again.
Well, what do we know about GDP? We know that, 60% or something of that is consumption, right?
Yeah, precisely. It's even more than that, right? It's even more than that. I think it's closer to 80%. So check this out. So Q2 last year, US Real GDP declined by 9% year over year. That was the largest drop ever since 1948. And then now Q2 2021, a year later, GDP hits a new high, advancing 12% year over year, which is the second largest increase going back to 1950. So these kind of once in a lifetime moments and figures, they happen, right? And that's kind of what the market is made up of, these big draw ups and drawdowns.
Well, I think it's obvious when you think about it and you spend a little bit of time putting it to your thought process, which is a year ago, you couldn't spend on anything. You couldn't go out. Everything was locked down. I mean, myself, my wife, and our family, we're traveling again. We're going out to restaurants, maybe not as what we would have done a couple of years ago, but you go out to the neighborhoods and you go out to see what airplanes are full, restaurants are full, people are going to sporting events and other things, even countries are open. So it's happening. And so that's why everything is up dramatically over a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I agree. Coming off a bottom, it's on a relative basis, you should have expected things to be better when they look so gloomy 12 months ago. The other thing that you can't ignore is the response by the government, right? So monetary and fiscal policy, the helicopter money, the punch bowl, whatever you want to call it, trillions of dollars in stimulus. And I'll remember we're in the lunchroom. It was me and Matt McGrath, and we were watching Jerome Powell saying that he's going to cut the Fed funds target from 0.25% down to zero. And I think we both had a similar reaction of, what are you doing? Why use that bullet right now when you dropping rates is not going to make anybody want to go out and buy stuff again because everyone's afraid of this virus. And at first it was probably true. Yeah, it didn't matter because no one could do anything, to your point. But slowly but surely the market took it as they're going to be accommodative as you know what, and the speed and the magnitude with which they acted, it makes the GFC, the Great Financial Crisis reaction, look small by nature. And then now, of course, we're coming in record high GDP figures, but now everybody's worried. what's the reaction? What's the soft landing? How do we get away from the Fed buying $120 billion of treasuries and mortgage bonds every single month? What's that look like? So,
Well, but the Fed helped out the market, but not everybody owns investments in the market. So the big concern, I think, from a lot of people is what happens when unemployment benefits, the higher ones, run out, which are happening in different states in different months. What happens when this moratorium on evictions has just ended and people are kicked out? You know, if consumer spending is such a big part of GDP, how does this all play out when all of a sudden people are left off in worse shape? Because we've had this lift in this last year. We've had hands behind our back pushing us forward, and now those are being taken away.
yeah, precisely. When the wind's out the sails, we don't know what it's going to look like. I'll tell you though, from an employment standpoint, and I'm sure you have clients that you've had this conversation with, they need people to get back to work, and they are still having trouble finding people to fill the jobs that they have very much available. So I'm very interested to see, assuming everything does completely fall off in September, what happens, on top of the fact that I think about half of the states have already stopped those additional unemployment benefits, and we haven't seen a bunch of the needle moving too much. I wonder how much that is less about how much you can get paid by being unemployed versus I'm still not comfortable going out into the world because COVID and Delta and whatever it might be. So we'll see.
It's also that there's a lack of jobs in the jobs that people want to take. There's more jobs where people don't want to take those jobs. Sometimes you've got a difference in location. I mean, I think read an article in the Wall Street Journal. That's the biggest thing the Fed can't do anything about, is getting people back to work. Because if they're scared to go back to work, or they can't find the job, or they're not trained for the job, or the job is not in their location, there's nothing the Fed can do about that.
Okay, so everyone needs a tax break for going back to work.
Why don't we give more money out? That's the answer for everything, right?
Right, yeah. I wouldn't count them out. I wouldn't say that's not gonna happen. So look, the big headline here for me is what a recovery. Who saw this coming? And this chart, what I think it also does a nice job doing is look at the drop in GDP during the great financial crisis, which of course the world was coming to an end back then also, but look at how big the drop off is here, which again, just goes to show you it was the largest year-over-year drop in GDP. But up and to the right, I think that's the headline.
Well, let's just hope we can get another 5-10 years out of this before we have another big drop, because
I'll take that.
You and I are going to lose a lot of hair very quickly if we have to go through this every couple of years.
Oh, I know. Give us a few more years of markets riding steady. That'd be nice.
That would be
so
nice.
What do you have, man?
So I read a book over the last few weeks. It was called Factfulness, 10 Reasons We're Wrong About the World and Why Things Are Better Than You Think. And it was written by a Swedish doctor and professor. His name is Hans Rosling. I think you said you read it as well a while back.
I did a while back. Yes, it's a good book. It reminded me of another book called Expert Political Judgment. I'm forgetting the name of the dude that wrote that, but it's all the prediction business and also how things are better than you think they are.
Exactly. So it dovetails into what you were saying as people just thinking, oh my gosh, this has been so bad and it's not going to get any better and the world is awful and oh my gosh, everything's falling down. And so it starts off with really 12 basic questions about education, poverty, life expectancy, vaccinations, electricity. And it asks people from all over the world, hundreds of thousands of people, to answer the questions. And on average of the 12 questions, the correct number of people get it right. Or the average number of right answers is 2 out of 12. So even chimpanzee would randomly pick the right one would probably do better than the average human. They're saying, why is that? Why is everyone picking the wrong answers? They're saying, well, there's a lot of things that could be. It could be that there's an outdated view of the world. People just seem to think what they thought 50 years ago is still happening today. That things are not changing. It could be that there's a lot of negativity bias out there, right? The media is always reporting bad news out there. It's also hard to see change, right? It's hard to report today, hey, guess what? There were no deaths because of an airplane falling off from the sky.
Yeah.
The same news story every single day.
Negativity sells without a doubt, right? It has an allure to it. And people, I forget the exact line, but it's this idea of pessimism sounds like someone trying to help you. Optimism sounds like a sales pitch, so to speak. So I think you're right.
Well, I tend to be an optimistic person, but I'll give you a couple statistics, and I'll give you first a quiz question here. So talk about extreme poverty was one of the main things that they looked at.
Okay.
In 1800, 85% of humanity lived on less than $2 a day. Okay, what they call extreme poverty. In 2017, this is inflation adjusted, without Googling it, Marcos. Any idea what that number is?
Hold on. So give me the frame again.
85% of humanity in 1800 lived on less than $2 a day. What is that percentage?
So 85% lived in poverty in 1800?
Correct.
So what percentage lives in poverty today worldwide?
Correct.
47%.
9%. We need a buzzer.
Wow.
9%.
That was a super bad guess.
Life expectancy 1800 was 31 years. A couple years ago, this is global, is now 72.
Okay.
The chart that I'm pulling up here is a chart that looks at both Sweden and the United States, because the professor in the book was Swedish gentleman, and the US. It shows that over time, from 1800 till now, how has life expectancy and income changed? And by income, we're doing GDP per capita.
There's yellow circles and green circles.
Yeah, the yellow is Sweden and the green is the United States, and the circles are the size of the population.
Okay. We're bigger than Sweden.
Yeah. But you can do this for almost every country in a website called gapminder.org, which I thought was really neat to see. It's every country's changed over time. If you did it to almost any country out there, even some of the socialist countries, even some of what we call the emerging market countries, it all has the same pattern. It all shows up and to the right. And maybe they're not as far as we are today, but there's a misnomer that things are not getting better, even if things are not perfect quite yet.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just went on the Gapminder site, and it opens with, "You are probably wrong about all these different issues."
Yeah, to that point, they asked people in the United States, what do you think, is there more or less crime a year ago than it is today? And they asked this question all the way from 1990 through 2015. And in every year, except for 2 years, the average US person said, yes, there is more crime now than there was a year ago.
Yeah.
Fact is, only one of those years of the 25 years was there more crime than the year before.
Yeah, it's easy because when you ask somebody that question, they default to asking themselves a different question, which is, how quickly can I recall hearing about crime? Right. And then that will increase the probability with which they say, oh, crime is rampant. I just read a story about someone getting robbed in my neighborhood or whatever it is.
Yeah, there's just so many encouraging statistics out there that we just fail to see. And they said, look, the world is not like a rock. The world doesn't just sit there and not move. Things change. But it's hard to see the change when you look at it over 200 years or 300 years or whatever the case may be, because it moves so imperceptibly slow that it's hard to report on that and you actually see it during your frame of reference. So they said, don't look at the world as us versus them, as developed versus emerging markets. You know, it's all a scale, and most countries now are not as poor and it's not as impoverished as we think.
Yes, 100%. So that reminds me of, I forgot who said it, the whole iron law in economics. Extremely good and extremely bad circumstances rarely stay that way for long, right? Because supply and demand adapt in ways that you just can't see coming, right? And it was this dude, Lester Brown, the economist, in 2008 said China would need 98 million barrels of oil a day by 2030. The world is currently producing 85 million per day. There go the world reserves. But of course, that's failure to kind of realize that things change. And
right.
What do? We produce more oil, right?
Same thing with births, right? They said that if it continues the way that it's going, we're going to run out of space. Too many people in the world.
Precisely.
But you know what? The birth rates are coming down across the entire world because you don't need now 6 births in order to have one healthy baby.
Yeah, I know. I I think trying to solve the sustainability problem by focusing solely on consumption is not the right way to handle that equation. And I think in the innovation side is where it's going to happen. I think we innovate our way out of those things. Sure. But I think the best way to innovate our way out of those things is have the highest probability of having another Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk born, which means have more babies so that the person can be born, hopefully they've already been born, that can innovate us out of that.
Well, I think Warren Buffett said it best in one of his interviews where he said, we've survived this long with basically half of the population only working, which is men, right? Now you've got all these women coming up. You've got a lot of more education. In a lot of countries, women are almost as equal as men in terms of pay, in terms of, not staying at home. So you now have a chance to have a lot more innovation. And how that, I think, parlays into what we're doing is as advisors looking for investment opportunities. You could say there's lots of other countries that are going to be your next big wave going forward.
Yeah.
It's going to be rely on the US, rely on these major countries. You're going to have other countries that will be joining us where we are. So there's a lot more investment opportunity.
Absolutely agree. Let's capture that innovation, invest in human innovation. I think that's a perfect way to end it, man. Anything else on your mind?
That's it.
All right, brother. Always good to chat.
We'll do it again.